So next up, we actually have Brian Douglas doing action-packed GitHub. He's currently a Beyonce advocate over at GitHub.
I don't need power. I am juiced. Sorry, you missed the first half of that conversation. He asked me if I needed power. All right, how's everybody doing? I'm doing well, but show of hands, doesn't seem like you guys are doing very well. That was an awesome demo, huh? All right, cool. Sorry, I'm just stalling because I want to use my phone. Cool, so who's ready to hear about action-packed JAMstack? Cool, all right. More people than are doing well, awesome. Well, I'm just gonna jump right in. I've got a lot of slides. This talk literally is action-packed, but I just want to give a brief internet history. I've got a couple slides to talk through. What was really cool is that Gerald, he basically unloaded his heart here and told us his first site, which was the World of Warcraft server. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure Twitter heard. But yeah, that was built on PHP and MySQL. But before that, I used to do a lot of tinkering, especially in high school. I do look really good for my age, but I'm slightly older than what you think. And I used to make like HTML sites in high school, and they looked all like this. Well, they didn't look like this. This is Craigslist. But the cool thing about Craigslist is that it just works. There's not really much to it, just a bunch of HTML and CSS. And if you ever inspected Craigslist, open up the Chrome DevTools. So this is all the CSS that makes Craigslist work. Isn't that pretty cool? Yeah, all that CSS to make that same site work everywhere in every single city. And the weird part of it is that they literally have an important in there. So like there's hardly any CSS, but they're actually using important to like instrict some colors, which I just saw that baffling. But I like doing this, and so if you guys don't know if you guys know who I am. I'm Brian Douglas, and I used to work at Netlify, and one thing I did was I took Space Jam, spacejam.com. You guys know Space Jam? It's a pretty cool movie starring Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny. And I took that site and I basically inspected it and copied the entire page, and then I hosted it on Netlify because I just wanted to see if anything broke. I think the only thing that broke is the original animated GIF stars. That was the only thing that's not actually working there. But other than that, the entire site works. Sorry, also some of the videos didn't actually link properly. But regardless, and I thought it was very cool because I think like when the web works, like I think we all win. And then going through a little more history, like we had JavaScript was a thing. It got like really serious back in the 90s when it first came out. Not really, but it got serious in the last couple of years. And then things started getting a little more complicated because prior to JavaScript actually being taken seriously, we had these other frameworks, this Web 2.0 frameworks, like WordPress and Drupal, and then things got really complicated. And then we got into like the modern web, which was a few years back, and all the sort of mine infrastructure you had to like sort of deploy to get a site up and running. You had to learn like the back to front frameworks and get stuff up and running. And then all these like dependency managements. And if you're a Ruby person, you're a Ruby person. If you're a JavaScript person, you're a JavaScript person. That really shouldn't matter. And I like where we eventually came out of this when JavaScript started demanding to be taken seriously. Who's a JavaScript developer here? Anybody write JavaScript? Okay, most of us in the room, cool. So this worked. So there's these build tools, and would take all that dynamic CRUD apps and make them into these statically built indexed HTML. So like exactly where we came from, exactly where Craigslist literally just watched the world go by it and then come back, like a full circle. And I think the entire web is like, it's all cyclical. I think most things are cyclical. I think tulips are popular, blue jeans, they're also coming back in style. I'm just kidding. You guys always wear blue jeans. But, so we went from all these dynamically rendered web applications to now bundling all of this stuff in the static. And the best part of this is that we would host this all on expensive servers and spend like $20 a month and then FTP into all this stuff just so we can have the benefit of having a blog, right? Because that makes a lot of sense. And then we find out no one actually is reading our blog for $20 a month. That's my life. You should read my blog. I haven't written on it in like a year. I'm just a little busy. I had a second kid, so babies take a lot of time. Thank you. So now we have the on-demand build structure where now you just run npm run build, and you can have a site ready to go. And you can drag and drop it on the Netlify or wherever you want to go. And it all works, and it's great. And I think the real backbone of this whole JAMstack movement is around CI and integration. So the fact that you can actually just git push to something, and then the site starts building without you needing to watch any sort of logs or streams, that's great. Because like one thing I'm really bad at is infrastructure and running servers, and I don't want to have to worry about that. And if I can get that for free or low cost, then I am definitely going that way. So we're here to talk about JAMstack, right? JavaScript, APIs, and markup, right? Who's never heard of JAMstack? And you sat through the whole first talk? Oh wait, no, sorry, I did it on purpose, sorry. Who has heard of JAMstack? That's what I meant to say, and you guys all were paying attention. All right, cool. So I'm here to really talk about this first section of this sort of architecture, which is the Git side. The cool thing is that everybody's using Git. It's beneficial for me because I work for this small incubated company inside of Microsoft. It's called GitHub. Have you heard of that? Yeah? Cool. So you guys, I won't have to do my marketing pitch for you, but we're a decentralized solution for asynchronous communication across web developers through the globe. I think I got that right. I think Nat will be really proud of me on that one. But yeah, this is basically what it looks like. I think most of us, who's not using Git? Maybe don't raise your hand. Who's using Git? Yeah, cool. I just came back from GDC a couple weeks ago, and there were a lot of Perforce maniacs there. I mean, for good reason, they need it for the large files. But I had no idea how to talk to them and like understand their issues, and we had a lot of smart people there to actually solve that. But this is the Git workflow is like, it's literally there for us to communicate. It's us to basically have entire versions of Space Jam on our site, and then work with our remote employees or the employee next to us, and then ship that up to GitHub, which is cool. So let me introduce myself after 15 slides. I'm Brian Douglas. I am truly a Beyonce advocate at GitHub. She is who I talk about. Because usually GitHub, when I go to places, people already know what GitHub is. It's one of the benefits of having a company that's been around for 11 years and sort of like ingrained in most laptops. But when I say Beyonce advocate, I actually was thinking about this when I first joined. I joined GitHub as the first developer relations hire after 10 years, which is kind of weird. Before everybody was a developer advocate because you just happened to like tell the person next to you. And we grew up to 31 million developers, and we found that we needed to scale our efforts of being out in the community as well as receiving feedback. And I use Beyonce as this analogy because GitHub's 31 million developers. Beyonce has this thing called the Beehive. You guys heard of that? No? Okay, let me teach you. So it's like her super fan group, and these are all these individuals who like really support Beyonce and what she does. Like, they literally, so the Beehive is what really renamed Coachella to Baychella last year. It was like one person who like tweeted it, and then like the news media picked it up, and then it became Baychella. And the only reason anybody was showing up and like buying the whole last, like I think Coachella sells that pretty early on, but her performance the year prior was pretty intense and pretty awesome. But what I'm getting at is I constantly always ask myself, what would Bay do? And that's why I'm Beyonce advocate. And I'll quickly go to this GIF and say that Beyonce would go to bat for the Hive. So if you are a GitHub user, I'd love to hear your story and your complaints or your wins on how to use GitHub. I get a lot of feature requests, and I actually do pass those along. But if they're duplicate, I just delete them. A couple years ago, I don't know if you guys are paying attention around, I sort of saw this come through like about 3 or 4 years ago. All these open source developers on GitHub had all these grievances, very similar to like Martin Luther when like nailing on the church door. Forgive me if I butchered that story, but I wasn't there for it. But I was there for this, and they basically said, hey, these are all the problems with open source on GitHub. Like, it'd be great if you started shipping features that would help to cater to like us managing large projects. And GitHub took notice to this. It actually took us 2 weeks to respond, but mainly because internally everybody's kind of like, hey, what do we do? How do we approach this? How do we like not upset some of our best open source contributors on GitHub, or maintainers for the matter, and like solve these problems? And we ended up solving them. Actually, last summer was like the last PR to close the final issue on this, as well as a couple other repos that are very similar that started after this. So every single feature that you've seen in the last year and you're like, wow, GitHub's shipping so fast, it's because like we hit almost the finish line of this, and we finally finished all those grievances for that. So If you haven't been on GitHub.com in a while, I know some people are really into that command line, like myself. And so you might have missed some of those features, but let's check those out. But I like to say, when life gives you lemons, listen to Beyonce's Lemonade. No, seriously, when these problems happen, we had to think through, how can we solve these problems and get ahead of it? Rather than be reactionary, you want to be pro-actionary. There's a better word for that. Proactive. That's it. Man, these lights are hot. All right. So, and the way I usually like to solve this, and the way, if you come to me with a feature request, I'll probably flip this around and say, you could probably build this yourself. Because one, you're probably a GitHub user, and two, you're probably using GitHub longer than I have, or better at it than I am. So we have this thing called the GitHub API. So it's nothing crazy. Raise your hand if you guys have actually used the API to build something. All right, this is an advanced group. I've been in rooms bigger than this, and like there would be one person raise their hand, and I'll say, okay, now look at that hand, now ask them questions after this talk. No, but seriously, the API has been around for 11 years, and GitHub's been around for 11 years. So shortly after GitHub basically launched publicly as their thing, they actually opened up an API, a public API, about 3 months later. And this API is really what supports a lot of things like Netlify and like Travis and Circle. Everybody hooks into this API, and we're here to support those integrators on our platform. And really what it's about is like improving the GitHub experience. So like it's going to be very hard for me to take all your notes of what you maybe want to see in GitHub. I'll probably take most of them and then ship them off to the proper teams. I'll also probably, if they're redundant, I might tell you to just go to the community forum and then fill it out, especially for the really unique ones. I'll talk about some unique features people have requested after, if you hit me up in the after party. But I think the backbone of what everybody is really looking for is how can you improve your workflow as a GitHub user, just to get your code done, your work done properly. And again, I always try to flip it around and say, hey, maybe you can leverage the GitHub API to build a feature on top of GitHub that makes it work. But the issue with this is the GitHub API, if you've ever been to developer.github.com, the API it's nothing but reference docs. We're getting better. We have a really good docs team. And I think I just retweeted, we're actually hiring for a docs person. So if you like technical writing and you want to do GitHub docs, definitely talk to me about that one. But it's all reference docs. And the best way, my personal way of how I learned how to use GitHub is actually the CTO at Netlify. I used to sit next to him. And he used to work at GitHub. And I would just ask him questions all day. And every time I came up with something, I'd be like, hey, how do you do this? Hey, you know you can do this thing or whatever? And he's like, yeah, just do it this way, whatever. And that's like my entire life. I did that in my previous job too as well. If I wanted to learn how to use GitHub's API, I'd have to ask the person next to me. And mainly because I didn't have time to really go to reference. I had to ship stuff really fast. And also, he was right there. But not everybody has somebody right there that used to work at GitHub or knows GitHub better. So we built these things called GitHub apps. And these GitHub apps are a better way for you to integrate on our platform. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to know before you walk into, a lot of reference stuff that you need to know. We've prepackaged a solution for you to get a GitHub integration really quickly, and then we call those GitHub apps. And they basically walk through a path like this. So if you have an action that you do every single time, either through GitHub or through Git or whatever. I know GitHooks is another thing. It's more on it's like your GitHub dev version. Just launched. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I was just making a joke to the last talk. All right. Sorry, I'm not sure why I'm narrating my own talk. So there's one really good example, and this is like probably the best example I've seen out of all GitHub apps, because I think it's a really good way for us to get the context around this. So who opens pull requests on GitHub?
Right? Okay. All right.
There's a couple of us. Actually, all of us. So this one person in Chicago, his name's Abi Noda. He used to be a CTO of a startup. And when I say CTO of a startup, he was like a CTO of a two-person company. So he ended up growing the team because he happened to be the first engineer. And what he noticed is every time someone opened a pull request and every time they did a one-on-one, people would complain about the fact that no one was reviewing their PRs. And this is a common problem. This is a problem that I have no matter where I go. It's just no one has bandwidth to constantly look at stuff and the constant stream of information. And imagine a company like GitHub, we have like 600 engineers worldwide. Like it's a constant stream of stuff changing all the time, so you can't really keep up to date. But if you're in your small team, all you have to do is take that PR link and then go into Slack and then @mention the person you want to see your PR, and then they'll look at it. But that never happens because Monday comes around, they're like, I didn't get to it. And then Tuesday comes around, they're like, you never looked at my PR. And then Wednesday comes around, you never looked at my PR. And then Thursday, same thing. Friday, it's like, never mind, I'm not shipping on a Friday. but if you have tests, you should. But anyway, so Abi built this little trivial application called Pool Reminders. So basically, this takes your PR, and through a couple lines of code, he would just randomly pick somebody else on the team to then assign it to, and then they would get notified in Slack. And then all the notifications would actually happen through this bot, essentially, on GitHub, which is genius. And it sounds really simple because it is. It's a really simple idea that he took to GitHub Marketplace. And at this point, actually, a year from now, he did an Indie Hackers podcast and a blog post, and he was making like $5,000 a month on this simple application to remind people of pull requests. So I'm not saying go ship something and make money. Like, that's probably not the idea here. I think you really should ship something to improve your workflow, and there's probably a lot of ideas that hopefully maybe I can pique some interest through this. So Abi solved his problem by every time there's a pull request, go ahead and remind somebody once a day, whoever's auto-assigned to it, to look at the pull request. Like, there's no reason for us as humans to take brain load to then ping people and try to remember who was the last person I had on my last PR. I shouldn't add that person because I add somebody new, and it's like this, oh no, I'm always picking this person because they always say yes. So some really cool benefits that come through our GitHub app is webhooks. So everything that you probably want to do with our features is you open a pull request, it does this, you do a comment, it does this, you do a push, it does that. All these webhooks can be generated through GitHub for free, and this is all built in with GitHub apps. As well as authentication. We use JWTs under the hood too as well. But if you aren't familiar with JWTs, if maybe you aren't using one of our sponsors or one of the JAMstack aficionados here at the companies, then there's a lot of load. Like, we're a Ruby shop, we do Ruby on Rails. So JWTs didn't really come out the gate as popular with Ruby people. So then now you have to teach a bunch of Ruby people what JWT is and why they missed it, why weren't you paying attention. Like, that's no longer a problem because as long as you have a GitHub account, you can build a GitHub app. As well as some other things. The biggest thing I think really is the fact that if you happen to pay for an organization and you don't want to hand off to an admin or somebody to basically do the administrative work on your team, do some of these trivial things, because you only pay for like 5 seats or 10 seats or whatever seats you want to pay for, GitHub apps take no seats. They're just bots that sit as a tokenless actor, I guess is what they call them in the documentation. So they can sit in your organization and do work for you as needed. And there's no limit on how many bots you can have in your application. So a couple of years ago, after the launch of GitHub apps, a solo GitHub employee built this framework called Probot. And mainly because they wanted to build a better ecosystem around the idea of GitHub apps. They felt like it was a really cool thing that no one really knew about. Actually, raise your hand if you know what a GitHub app was before I said it 2 slides ago. Okay, wow, we're indoctrinating everybody. Is it because of Probot? Has anybody heard of Probot? Okay. Was anybody in my Probot workshop last year? Okay, I didn't know if people like to jump coast like I do. All right, cool. Thanks for coming to the workshop. So I did a whole workshop on Probot, and this is literally, it's a node-based GitHub application, and it gets you all bootstrapped. So we have create Probot app if you're very familiar with React, and it gets you all the stuff you need, all the bells and whistles right away. And it's built on this open source community of tools, SDKs called OctoKit. So if you happen to be doing anything besides JavaScript, there is an SDK for you within the OctoKit ecosystem. And that's literally just get you the bare bones of interacting with the GitHub API without all the sort of cruft back and forth looking at reference documentation. And essentially what it does, it just listens to webhooks through the GitHub API. So Bex was one of my interns last summer, and they actually created this very trivial welcome bot. So every time someone opens a new issue, you can now add a needs response to a label to that issue. So if someone happens to go triage through all your issues or your open issues, you can actually just be able to filter just by that one filter and know that someone hasn't done this. They also built another one which is not pictured, which is, so this is what actually needs response bot. The other one's a welcome bot, which is like, hey, thanks for opening an issue. By the way, check out this, maybe sign the CLA. Like all that stuff that you have to do manually as like an employee, or maybe install an entire server to run. By the way, Probot can run in Lambda functions. I think someone actually got it to work in Netlify functions too. I kind of lost track of that repo, but either they're really close or it's already out there live. But Probots, they're nothing but 10 lines of JavaScript that do interaction with webhooks. And looks like my phone's freezing, so going with the finger. All right, and I just explained this. So GitHub, and I want to be very cautious as well, GitHub has no CI system. Like we like to build tools for you to build stuff like CIs for yourself. We don't want to be the one size fits all for everything. We prefer to be the one size fits all for Git in collaboration across teams. So I just want to preface that because the first question I get once I get off stage is like, oh, so how you guys built a CI? Cool. We didn't build a CI. I know there's a public blog post out there that said we built a CI, but we didn't. But I just want to talk about continuous integration real quick. This is probably all familiar, and I think we just went the whole talk on this too as well, the beginnings of this. The CI pipeline, the first step is your code, source control. So we all basically check that box because we are using GitHub, right? Correct? Nothing else. There's no other tool out there. The other one is automation. So the cool thing about CI is that it automates certain things for you. You no longer have to worry about how to get your deploy running or how to get your code shared amongst cross teams. Like that's all built in for you. And I mentioned source control. And the biggest part too as well between there is like the build pipeline. So being able to run your tests asynchronously or synchronously, whichever you prefer, without needing to sit there and watch and read logs is pretty much key for the CI tool. And I just quote from Beyonce, if everything was perfect, you'd never learn, you'd never grow. And that's the cool thing about having tests and build systems. I have a really concrete example that we did last summer, which GitHub now only runs on JavaScript for the front end. There's no framework, there's no jQuery, we removed it. And the way we did it is that we built in our build system, we actually built the check for jQuery. And if you had jQuery in your PR, it kindly asked you, the bot would respond and kindly ask you to write the JavaScript. And it actually took that jQuery and then rewrote it in JavaScript in the PR. So if you decided not to do it, it was your fault because all you had to do was just copy and paste and then run the test again. So there's a whole blog post on that on our engineering blog if you're interested. And I'll show you more details of how that works in the next coming slides. But I think the goal for all of us is that we want to get a point where all the trivial things that we were doing, like literally throwing logs down into a basement, should be automated for us. Like there's no reason for us to start breaking sweats on how to like get tests. Well, we should probably get test passing, but how to get your test up and running as a new employee, that should just be git clone, run the test, and it works. So this is action-packed, and the reason for the name is because if you didn't know and if you didn't read the description, we launched a new feature called GitHub Actions. That's the actual name. And it's the biggest feature since the pull requests. And pull requests came out the same year we launched the GitHub API too as well. So pull requests kind of changed the way we sort of interact with our code. Prior to that, you have a thumb drive and you hand it over or you email it. I made a joke on Twitter. My older brother, he asked me to help him with this website. I'm very happy I've upgraded from like Windows vulnerability issues or like random hardware issues to now I can actually look at code. The problem is that he emailed me his entire source code for his website. Granted, it was just an index to HTML, but I kindly reminded him I worked at GitHub that you can actually just create an account and then show me that way. So we did that. But what I'm getting at is that we can do a pull request together and we could talk about it, what we did while I was on a plane. And these GitHub Actions are pretty cool because it takes all that sort of ideas around GitHub apps and pre-packaging ways for you to interact with GitHub API, and it builds you a platform to take that code. So whether or not you write your own code, you already have code written. So I used to I run the script called Creeper in every company I go to, where I auto-assign people to my PRs. This is before we had this as a feature at GitHub. And this is something I could run arbitrarily in my code no matter where I go. It's like one Go file, and this runs no matter where. And I can set this up as a GitHub action, which honestly I haven't done yet because I have one person on my team besides myself. So it's hard to automate for one person. That's why. So GitHub Actions, you can combine. So with GitHub Apps, you can automate one workflow. With GitHub Actions, you can automate multiple workflows together. And I probably should have this side by side, so my apologies. But you can also run side by side between GitHub apps. But the other one, woo! You could also run code from anywhere. So literally, you can write JavaScript into GitHub, and you can point that to your action, and your action will run that code whenever you want it to run. The other cool thing, the feature is sort of pre-packed into this thing, is called having secrets on GitHub. So this is huge because who's ever shipped secrets to their code? Or the GitHub? Like I did this once, and it cost me a lot of money. No, well, it didn't. It was like $40,000, but AWS was really nice and said I didn't have to pay any of it. Now I have to use AWS for everything now, though. It's in my contract that I signed. Actually, I wasn't supposed to say that out loud. So you can provide secrets without worrying about putting those out in the open. I say this as I was going through my examples, I noticed one of my secrets were in my code. So brownie points if you find it. And the other cool thing is that you get 59 minutes of runtime. So with apps, it's all on demand. So you can run a server and have it running forever and pay $20 a month. Or you can throw those in a Lambda function. The difference with Actions is that it's a Docker container. It's 59 minutes. So if you have a long running something that needs to run, you have that with Actions. You don't have that with GitHub Apps. This is the example. I removed the key in the example because that's when I noticed it. But I have a cool little gift that I give to all my repos, which is every time you do .gift and then a word, it will then provide a gift into your comments. Now, this is really trivial, and this is like me testing out the waters of how this thing works. And the 2 lines of code that you really need to pay attention to are highlighted in colors. I'm here. That's where I'm actually sort of scraping out the gift word, whatever the command as well as the word. And then the last line is where I'm returning the actual comment and then creating that. So this is all built on OctaKit and Probot. And the cool thing is that it's 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, maybe 9-ish lines of code, and it works. Now, the cool thing about that is since it's code that's living on GitHub, all I have to do is actually point to my repo. So my repo is called Faint Pool, mainly because I originally was hosting this in Glitch, and Glitch gives you cool names. So the repo itself is right there. And on the right is the UI for Actions. So we have a UI version, and then we have if you just want to write code. Now, the left looks kind of like YAML/JSON, but it's actually the HashiCorp language, so the HCL. And that's what we're looking at right there. But again, it's only a few lines of code to put into my repo, and now I have an action running. And this on the right here, I realize this is a GIF, but I took a picture of it. That's a Beyonce after I called a Beyonce command to put a Beyonce GIF. So super trivial, but the fact that I can run arbitrary code from my repo, I think it's pretty cool. Now, Jess Fraz popularized from Docker. She was on Docker for a while and Microsoft and GitHub for a few months. Jess actually stood on stage last year and talked about how she has this issue where she has Docker Hub. She has her name, but then when she originally signed up for Docker Hub, she used a completely different name. So she has to, because everybody knows her by Jess Fraz, she has to keep synchrony between all her Docker Hub containers. So she has an action that every time she pushes to GitHub, it updates on Docker Hub on 2 different usernames. And on top of that, she also runs tests for 2 different usernames. And I think she also has a whole other GitHub repo too that she also keeps synchrony because of that same reason, because she has 2 names everywhere. So this is her, and this is an example that I could not spend enough time to come up with a better one than this, so I'm just using hers. But she's running actions, an entire workflow in actions with multiple actions synchronously. Asynchronously. Here, synchronously and synchronously. So if you just follow the streams. So I wanted to talk through just really quickly too about this thing called the checks API, because I think most of us probably aren't using this at all. If you are using the API, is this true? Anybody prove me wrong? Okay, this Netlify people because they use checks. Yeah, I'll check to the mail. All right, sorry. This was supposed to be way funnier. My dad jokes are just like off the whim. So checks API, it's something that you guys, you already know about the status API because every time you open a PR, if you have Circle or Travis on there, or Netlify for the matter, you'll see inside your PR like deploy is ready or deploy started. Pretty cool. Checks is like way more sophisticated. It's a better way for you to get more feedback onto your repo. If that's the place you are. Like for example, GitHub, we use a lot of different services. We have our own CI system that we built in-house. It's not open source, called Janky. And that, I have no idea how to install that or where that goes, or even how to get in there to look at the logs. But the cool thing about checks is that all my logs are on my repo. So I don't need to know what we're using and how we get there. All of it's there. So that's what that is. This is the status API / checks API. So the status box is where you would normally see in your PR. Travis has switched over to checks as of last summer. And they also have this box too as well. So if you click through, you'll actually go to another screen, another tab on your PR. And if you, I anticipated a different screen coming up. So I created this checks app. And I used Beyonce's song Check On It. Now, you probably have never heard of the song because it was a soundtrack. It was in the soundtrack of Pink Panther, which was a horrible movie. But I promise you the song's really good. So you should definitely check it out. or you should check on it. And so I took this song and I put a lyrics MD file into my repo, and I added this linter onto my repo as well. Originally, this linter was a GitHub app. It's here if you want to check it out. It's called Linter Alex. It's also an open source project on NPM as well. And basically what it does is this checks for language. So if you have any sensitive language or curse words or stuff like that, it'll give you a nice little reminder and say, hey, maybe you should use a different word than that. It also taps you on the shoulder for pronouns. And so it's like a scale. You can actually make the scale strong or less strong, or just delete it, rather. And this is a slide that I thought I was going to see. So if you weren't aware, now all of your repos have this little tab called checks. So if you do have any checks running in the background, for example, in Netlify, you will see it in there. And this is me basically adding the check on it song onto my repo and then open a pull request. And then Alex is basically going to complain about my language. So here it's my first annotation that's there is asking me to maybe use a gender neutral pronoun, which is like maybe kid or child instead of boy or girl. And super trivial, but this is me just showing you how checks work. I also want to point out that checks, they run through this thing called the check suite. So if you do want to dig into the API, you just need to have the context of check suites, or where your checks are attached to every pull request known demand that you create as of last summer. And then it runs a check run. So each one of these check runs, you could actually run some code, and based on pass, fail, or whatever you want to do, you can go re-trigger a new run. One of these examples is adding comments to your GitHub PRs. You could actually add a comment to your PR and say, hey, the code's wrong. And then you could actually, it's a new feature as of this summer as well, thanks to checks. Then you can also accept the changes. So you can actually write the code to fix it. And then the other user on the team can then accept those changes. And then once you accept the changes, it reruns the check and then says, okay, cool, it's still passing, not broken. So that way you can't just write code in github.com and be like, someone else wrote it for me and it's broken. So now it's their fault because it's your PR. Anyway, you don't need to do the get blame game. So that's pretty much what it is. And then at the end of it, you're going to have a completed check. So I just wanted to point out the fact that Actions doesn't really take too much effort. It's only got 2 steps for you to switch over from any sort of integration or API. So if you're using Probot, that's cool. If you're not using Probot, you use something like your own homegrown tool to interact with the GitHub API. The first thing you need to do is add a Docker file. That's all you have to do. It's in our documentation. If you don't know how to use Docker, I think it's pretty lightweight at what you have to actually put in there. So I'm just running node. And then the very last line, which I'm not going to highlight, is pointing to the actual file what the code is. So this is, again, going back to like where you can run arbitrary code. Check it out. It's really awesome. You probably get one done on the airplane on the way home. The other one is the main.workflow file. So the actual point where you actually tell the check how to run is in this file. So this is going back to the HashiCorp, the HCL, if you want to write it in code, or if you want to do it in the UI, it's on you, whichever way you want to do it, but they both work. Quickly, I just wanted to go through just one more API, which is the deployments API, and just a couple more slides, and I'm done. I had this idea where I wanted to, every time I put PR, I'd want to trigger deploy and then have a staging environment to view live on the web. That was a quote by me. It already exists. It's called Netlify. So I just wanted to point out, but they already stole my thunder back there. Netlify is using checks. They're also a GitHub app too, so if it asks you to install on a repo, that's literally the app being installed onto your repo. That's how GitHub apps work. And this is more of like if you're using Netlify, you've already seen a lot of these pages, but the fact that like things like redirect rules, you can actually see that in line. So if you have a failure as part of your PR and you didn't test it with the new Netlify dev, then you can actually see the failure directly in your PR through the checks API or the checks UI. And this is me basically writing bad redirects here. So I just want to point out a couple of the sort of last thoughts and some links for you to take pictures of. GitHub Actions exists literally to empower developers. We're not trying to steal your thunder or steal your code or whatever you might be scared of, or maybe you read Reddit or Hacker News. Like we're literally just providing tools so then you can increase your workflow and then high five your team when you're done. One last thing is a new deployments dashboard too. I just wanted the little jab to Netlify because they don't have this integrated. So GitHub Pages as of today, as of last summer, they have a deployments dashboard on GitHub. It's very similar to the Netlify, to the checks UI. So now you can actually see when your logs fail for GitHub Pages. So what I did is I created a whole new GitHub app/action where I can bring in all my Netlify logs onto GitHub. And the cool thing is I can see that deployment. So if I happen to if I'm new to the team, I don't know what Netlify is, and I'm not sure what this thing is that I'm looking at, you can go to the deployments tab and then click a button and look at my deployment or my deployment logs on Netlify as well. And the way I did this is about 12 lines of code. I probably should have counted, but this is basically me using OctaKit to basically look for every time there's an event that's a deployment, go ahead and add a log into our new deployments API inside of GitHub's. And if you're interested in looking this up and how this works, check out bdougie/loglify. It's a mouthful on GitHub, and you can sort of poke at the code, fork it, complain about it. I will not respond to issues. It's not my day job. I'm just kidding. But yeah, and then if you're interested to get Actions access, so we are in beta, at least for a little longer. So you should sign up if you're interested, if you have an idea. Come find me. Come find me, and I can get you access much quicker. So you just have to click the button, and then I can maybe get your name in ahead of the list if you're very interested. Everything I talked about too, as well as the docs, the reference docs, is developer.github.com. And there's a whole little quick start that one of my teammates made. The same teammate that created the Alex linter created this Actions quick start guide. So check that out if you just want to get your feet wet after you get beta access. And other place too, if you do. This only works if you do have Actions access. So the way the beta works is that you can't actually use any of the public actions unless you have access. It kind of makes sense. So, but if you're interested, Marketplace does have it. You can search for Actions there, and there's all these other ideas that are better than the ones I showed you. So definitely check those out. Community forum, just putting it up there because that's a good place to ask questions if you can't get to me. And oh yeah, I host a podcast. It's called JAMstack Radio. That's why my voice sounds so familiar. And thank you very much. That's where I'm on the internet, and that's what Beyonce looks like. Thank you very much.